When it comes to being an entrepreneur, one of the things that we have to learn to do is think outside the box. Now, the problem I've always had with thinking outside the box is it doesn't really explain anything. It doesn't really make any sense. How can you think outside the box? If you're in the box, it's really difficult when you're stuck in a box, in a worldview, to think outside that box. And if we clarify the statement a little bit so that we call it listening outside the box, it starts to make a bit more sense. Because thinking outside the box means stepping outside of your worldview, means stepping outside of the things that you hold to be fundamentally true. But when you're listening outside the box, now you're bringing information in from outside. And this is the key thing to being an entrepreneur, is understanding that to be an entrepreneur, you have to adopt a culture change. And a lot of time people think of culture change in terms of their business, in terms of their employees, in terms of their staff. But when we are entrepreneurs, we have to think of culture change in terms of ourselves. We have to change our own culture. We have to change how we think and feel. And that's the real secret to being an online entrepreneur, or being an entrepreneur of any type, because what actually happens is we're educated in a system that teaches us to exchange our time for money and gives us certain values and belief systems that aren't necessarily beneficial. And then what happens is we leave school and college and university, and we've got all these belief systems and ideas that have been instilled in us based on a system where the top 1% of the people in the world earn their money through residual income, and the rest are exchanging their time for money, and they're working for the rest of the people. School and university and college don't prepare us to be entrepreneurs, and we have to understand that. So the fundamental problem we have with being an entrepreneur is that we don't think correctly, and we don't practice the correct emotional values. So when it comes to changing ourselves and becoming someone who's more capable of being an entrepreneur, we have to change our mental values, but we also have to change our emotional values. So what that means is we have to change our head, heart. We have to change the way we think and the way we feel about entrepreneurial activities, about money, about our time, and generally about the way we view life. And to give you an example, I was talking to a friend and we was talking about how they could improve their life, and their response was, if I get a better job. You see, an entrepreneur doesn't think like that. An entrepreneur doesn't think I can improve things by exchanging my time for more money. An entrepreneur will think, how can I create something of value? How can I create an asset? How can I create something that can be sold over and over again? But this person couldn't think like that because they'd never been educated outside of the system, shall we call it? We'll just call it the system. She hadn't been educated outside the system, so the only thing she knows was based on the education she had, which was lacking. As an entrepreneur now, we have to listen outside the box. We have to listen to other people that have been there. We have to educate ourselves. We have to take time to listen to people that have already traveled the path. And that's key in all of this. I used to run an antiques business, and for the first 3 years it didn't make any money whatsoever, that business, and I lost money. And then one day I just realized I needed to start soaking up the experts' information. I didn't go on the internet. I went out and I bought expensive books, and we learned how to make the antiques business successful by listening to other people. So when it comes to changing the way we think and we feel, the 4 patterns are really easy to change, because that's just educational. That's not too difficult. We can read books, we can watch videos, that's not that hard. But when it comes to changing some of our emotional values, that's what's really difficult, because what tends to happen is in life, we learn to treat our emotions as the absolute standard for our opinion on everything. We like to think we're logical, but a lot of the time, we base what we think and what we do on how we feel about those things. And that's a problem, because our emotions are then driving us. And if those emotions, for instance, are faulty, if they're based in something that happened when you were younger, for example, you might be really shy because you was heavily criticized as a child, and an emotional value now tells you not to speak up, not to push yourself forward, that's going to damage you as an entrepreneur. And it's going to be there. These emotions are going to be running in the background, and they're going to be quiet, and they're going to be sneaky, and they're going to be controlling you. And what starts to happen is we have these really bad emotional values that are driving us as entrepreneurs and stopping us succeeding. They're controlling us. They're the fundamental driving force of everything we do. And that's where we're going to struggle as an entrepreneur, because we're going to get discouraged. We're going to feel like we don't have value. We're going to feel we're not good enough, or we're not very good at what we're doing. And it's all going to be based on feeling, and it's going to inhibit us. And we won't take risks because of fear. And sometimes we'll take risks because we've got bad emotional values that teach us that risk taking for the sake of risk taking is actually a positive experience. So what we have to do is we have to start changing our emotional values and the influence they have over us. And the key thing in changing our emotional values is not allowing them to drive our decisions. When they're screaming out at us, when they're demanding that we do something, we have to realize they're not the absolute authority. We don't have to listen to them. We can choose with our will to do something different. And that can be quite an alien thought to a lot of people at the beginning, that you can act contrary to your emotions. But it's essential if you're going to be an entrepreneur. You cannot be driven by your emotions, because there's going to be times when you're down and discouraged and things aren't going your way, and you have to keep on going. Practically, how do we do that? Practically, how can we overcome an inhibiting emotion? And one of the key things is to realize that the simple process of taking an action opposite to the emotion is going to overcome that emotion. So one of the most important things you can do is, when your emotions are telling you cannot do something, is to decide and to move forward and take action on the opposite of what that emotion is telling you. And what happens is, when you do that, the emotion after a little while loses its grip and starts losing its power over you, because you're actually creating new behavior, new values, and new responses to that situation. So when it comes to thinking outside the box and listening outside the box, we have to understand, to be successful as an entrepreneur, the person that you change, the thing that you change is you. Secret to success as an online entrepreneur is a culture change in your own mind and in your own heart. To not allow your emotional values to dictate what you can and can't do. Emotional values that have been instilled from childhood and your education and the way people have reacted and responded to you in the past. And to be aware and to listen to those emotional values when they're telling you to do something different, and to take action opposite to those emotional values. And that is the secret to becoming a successful entrepreneur.